What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. We have made it to the NFL playoffs divisional round after a crazy wild card weekend. And as always, I've got my weekly NFL game picks outright versus the spread, along with our locks of the week. And if you guys enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe. Also, check us out online at adpfantasy.com. Become a member of the free newsletter. Get early access to content like this. Become a member. All the details and perks in the description. So check that out. But for now, let's get right into it. We kick things off on Saturday with a clash between the Minnesota Vikings at the San Francisco 49ers. And right now, probably no team coming off a bigger win on Wild Card weekend than the Vikings as they went into New Orleans and beat the Saints in overtime. Something that not a lot of people expected, including myself. But that game was a great reminder that when Kirk Cousins has his plethora of weapons around him healthy and he plays efficient and smart football, well, the Vikings can contend with anybody. Pair that with the fact that they have a formula for success in the playoffs, great rushing attack with a great defense. Well, they can, again, contend with anybody. The thing that's fascinating to me here is the fact that the 49ers have a very similar type of formula and they have a very similar type of game plan, honestly. If you think about it offensively, both these teams like to set things up with the rushing attack to maybe take off some pressure from their quarterbacks. That's not to say that the quarterbacks can't get it done, maybe just not as quite of an elite level like a Mahomes, Wilson, or Rodgers, because we have seen them be inconsistent throughout the regular season in spans. Then defensively, both great units, even though the 49ers have kind of struggled due to injuries. But big news for them is they're getting several key guys back, maybe none bigger than linebacker Quan Alexander, who's pulling the J.J. Watt, expected to return in the playoffs. Obviously, he will be limited, snap count type of situation. So it'll be interesting to see how much we get from him. But on the other side, some injury news for the Vikings. Look, Thielen and Diggs both getting nicked up during the week. They are expected to play, but that's something to keep an eye out for because if those statuses change, then it's definitely going to impact how you pick this game, specifically on the spread. And speaking of the spread right now, I think it's a little bit too high at -7. I feel pretty comfortable taking the Vikings because I think this game, along with the other NFC contests, Seattle and Green Bay, will be the two sole games that are competitive this divisional round. I don't think we're going to see a situation like we did in the wild card weekend where we have a bunch of crazy games, all four of them. In fact, I think the AFC games probably have a much higher chance of being blowouts, but that's a conversation for a little bit later. Getting back to this matchup, offensively, assuming Thielen and Diggs play and aren't hampered, I give the edge to the Vikings here. I'll go so far as to say that offensively, the guys surrounding Kirk Cousins, probably the best group of guys that are still left. You think about it, Dalvin Cook, definitely the best running back that's still left. Thielen, Diggs, and Rudolph, great pieces. The thing is, Kirk Cousins will ultimately have to get this victory for the Vikings because even though they've got the pieces to keep them in the game, make it competitive with Cook in the defense, we're going to have to see some clutch performances similar to what we saw in New Orleans in overtime that passed to Thielen, I think, at some point, at multiple points in this game. So it's going to be Kirk Cousins hype all over again this weekend. But I do, again, give him a little bit more credit than some people might. I think last week was a good example of that. Defensively, however, I do give an edge to the 49ers with those guys returning from injuries. I think we see a little bit of a role reversal here. Maybe the Vikings kind of look a little bit more like the Saints did with Drew Brees not getting as much time as expected in the pocket, especially with that stout edge rush of the 49ers. And then the X factor to me here, I'm going to go look at coaching. I like Kyle Shanahan. I love the game call that he can perform, and he can really almost get the 49ers out of any situation, or at least put them in a scenario to be able to contend and win. So slight advantage to them there. Also home field advantage for whatever that's worth. Look, maybe the Vikings are still riding that high and overlook the 49ers a little bit. The last time they had a huge win over the Saints 2 years ago, well, they kind of fell flat versus the Eagles in the next round. I don't think that'll happen here, just because, again, I think the styles of play are so similar that it's going to prevent either team from really running away from it. But at the end, ever so slight edge to the 49ers. I think it'll be close. The Vikings definitely will have a chance to win. Don't let others tell you otherwise, because it's going to be a close game. I really do believe that, which is why I feel pretty good about taking the Vikings on the spread of that -7 number at this point in time. I think when it's all said and done, 49ers do win, but probably closer to 2 or 3 point margin of separation. Next, we've got the Tennessee Titans at the Baltimore Ravens. And if you're in the camp that thought there was another team with a more impressive win than the Minnesota Vikings last weekend, it's probably that of the Tennessee Titans, as they went into Foxborough and beat the New England Patriots. Great victory for Tennessee. Now their prize is facing the Baltimore Ravens in Baltimore, with the best record in the NFL, with the NFL MVP in Lamar Jackson. Oh boy. Look, there's a reason why the spread here is at -9.5. There's a reason why the spreads in the AFC are much higher than that in the NFC, because on paper, this game is probably going to be much closer to a blowout in favor of the Ravens than any other game this weekend. I think this will probably be the largest margin of victory. It'll either be here, like I said, for the Ravens, or in the Texans-Chiefs game, which we'll touch on later. But looking at this contest, look, even though the Titans are coming off a nice victory, and Derrick Henry was a man amongst boys, and the defense took care of business, let's keep in mind it was versus an albeit struggling New England Patriots offense. And at the same time, Ryan Tannehill, even though he made the clutch plays when it mattered most, he didn't have all that great of a game. He was a game manager, and I just don't think that will cut it versus the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens have been absolutely sensational, phenomenal, blowing out teams since the start of the season. And like we've seen, there really hasn't been any defense that can totally shut down Lamar Jackson. I think at some point he will break loose and be able to go ahead and really kind of test that bend but don't break mentality of the Titans defense. Offensively, Mark Ingram a little bit hampered, but the Ravens basically have a running back in Lamar Jackson. They've got other bodies at that position, and I think their ability to have big plays very fast out of the gate is what could potentially doom the Titans. I just don't think the Titans offensively have the type of firepower to stay in the game with the Ravens. I think this one could get ugly if the Ravens go ahead and put up points in bunches fast like we've seen them do versus other teams. Also, let's not sleep on the Baltimore defense. They are very capable, and this is going to be a game where, look, last week versus the Patriots, we saw some scenarios where even if Ryan Tannehill wasn't amazing, the Titans could win because of the struggles of the Patriots. That won't be the case here. Tannehill will have to be on the level, or at least close to the level, of Lamar Jackson, and honestly, I just don't see that happening. It's been a great story for Ryan Tannehill and the Titans, but I think the Ravens right now are a freight train that it's not going to be stopped by the Titans at this point in time. I like the Ravens to win this game outright for sure. On the spread, look, it's a high number, but if there was a game to feature a blowout and for one of these teams to cover this high spread, I think it would be the Ravens, like we've seen them do throughout the season. So at the end, I'm going to go ahead and take the home team and the Ravens both outright and on the spread. Getting to Sunday's matchups, we start with the Houston Texans at the Kansas City Chiefs, aka the other game in the AFC that I think could be a blowout. Look, the Houston Texans did, in fact, already beat the Chiefs in Kansas City once in the regular season. But if you look at the game versus the Buffalo Bills, man, the Texans were lucky to win that game. Now, it was just to a point where Deshaun Watson said, I've had enough. I'm putting the team on my back. Watch this. And he got it done. Kind of like how we predicted, if you think about it. We said this Bills defense will probably hold for a while, but how long will that last? Well, we saw how long as Deshaun Watson really turned it on late in the third and in the fourth quarter. DeAndre Hopkins got it going. The absence of Will Fuller really did hamper that offense. But honestly, even if he were to return in this game, I'm not sure that offensively the Texans are going to be able to match up with the Kansas City Chiefs, because the first time these two teams played, let's not forget, Patrick Mahomes was limited. He was nicked up. He was hurt. Now he's as healthy as he's ever been. Tyreek Hill back healthy. Travis Kelce, you've got a couple burners there as well in Hardman. Damian Williams, last time we saw him play, had a great game to finish off the regular season. I really like the Chiefs here. Advantage to them. Last weekend versus the Bills, like we said, was a great example that this Houston team, even though it does have the ability with Deshaun Watson and DeAndre Hopkins to put up points, they're still young and they're still very inconsistent. They have issues on that offensive line. Deshaun Watson, more often than not, is running for his life. And even though I don't think the Chiefs' defense is as good as that of the Bills, it's still not a unit you want to sleep on. It really has improved since the latter part of the regular season. Look, the return of J.J. Watt was nice, but other than really one sack, he wasn't that big of a factor for the Houston Texans. I think here you're going to need an absolutely complete game from start to finish for the Houston Texans to have a chance. And even in that scenario on the road, I think it's going to be hard for them. Best case scenario here, I think the Texans cover the spread. I don't see them winning outright. This is the other game here on the AFC side of the bracket that I think is probably as close to as a lock as we have, even though, like I've said before, I hate to use that terminology once we get into the playoffs. Crazy things can happen. But on paper, the Chiefs are the more complete team. I will take Patrick Mahomes over Deshaun Watson. I think he's more consistent. I think he's got the better weapons. I think he's got the better defense. Kansas City, very hard environment to play in. I'm taking Andy Reid's offense team to go ahead and advance to the AFC Championship. I like the Chiefs outright. The spread -9.5, similar number to what the Baltimore Ravens have. If I were to compare those two games, I'd say there's a likelier chance that maybe this one is a little bit closer because of the high scoring ability, even though it's a little bit rarer for the Texans. But at the end of the day, I think the Chiefs are just the more complete team, and I don't have faith that the Houston Texans will play a complete game for 4 quarters. So I think the Chiefs, run away with this game and cover on the spread as well as it goes on. And finally, we get to our last game of the weekend with the Seattle Seahawks at the Green Bay Packers. In my eyes, the game that will be the closest of the bunch this weekend. In fact, I haven't gone with any underdogs so far, but this game, the exception, maybe a little bit spoiler, a little bit too early on. But there's a reason the spread is the lowest out of any game this weekend at -4 for Green Bay. I realize that the Seattle Seahawks are injured right now. I realize they didn't look all that great and dominant versus the Josh McCown led for the majority of that game Eagles last weekend. But that's been the MO of the Seattle Seahawks. They play teams close and they ultimately find a way to win because I keep saying it, I think they have the most clutch quarterback in Russell Wilson. What he can do with his arm, combined with his legs, combined with the intelligence he has to avoid big hits, I think that's second to none right now. And I know what a lot of people are going to say. Well, the Seattle Seahawks defense at the same time has also underperformed. And if there were ever a time for Aaron Rodgers, who hasn't put up those big numbers, to kind of have a bounce back game, it would be here. And don't get me wrong, I do think that's possible. I just think when you look at it, however, weapons wise, the Green Bay Packers, outside of Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones, who else do you have? For Seattle, at least you've got Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, Hollister as well. Look, there's not much to say about Marshawn Lynch. It's pretty clear he's been out of the league. Pete Carroll has said he's going to get some more playing time, but we'll see to what avail. It's more so Russell Wilson and what he can do with his legs that gives me courage in this Seattle rushing attack, which is what keeps opposing defenses honest. For the Green Bay Packers, they're really going to need, I think, a great game from their defense as well here. They've been more so consistent than the offense, I would say. But it's going to be tough to do versus Russell Wilson. I'm going to go ahead and say this game is close throughout. I think it's going to be the closest game this entire weekend. And it comes down in those scenarios to the quarterback play. Who do you have more faith in, Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers? And as good as Aaron Rodgers is, I just think Russell Wilson is a little bit better. I'm going to go ahead and take the Seattle Seahawks as underdogs to win this game. Look, maybe you don't like them outright. I understand that. I think this is the closest coin flip of a game that we have. But I urge you, go ahead and take the Seattle Seahawks on the spread. They haven't really had any blowout losses. The Green Bay Packers haven't really had any blowout wins. The Seattle Seahawks play teams very close. They are pretty good on the road as well. I think that'll be the case here. I think you can at least realistically rely on the Seattle Seahawks to cover on that spread, which is at -4 right now. I don't think that the Packers win by more than a field goal if they do manage to win. So at this point in time, Seattle outright and on the spread. So with that, we finish up our pick'ems, looking at our quote-unquote locks of the week. I'm going with the AFC side of things. Like I said before, I think the NFC games are going to be a lot more competitive and a lot tougher to call at the end. But the Ravens versus the Titans, I think the Ravens right now are just a freight train, and they are in a collision with the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, which, again, probably tells you that I like the Chiefs in their game versus the Houston Texans to also be victorious. I think the Chiefs' offense more potent than that of the Texans. I think that the Chiefs are more consistent, more experienced, so I will also take the Chiefs over the Texans. So with that, we wrap things up, and as always, let me hear it in the comment section. Did you agree, disagree with these picks? How do you envision things playing out, along with any other questions you guys might have? And as always, if you guys enjoyed, make sure to like, subscribe. Also, check us out online at adpfantasy.com. Check out all the perks, details in the description. But for now, I'll see you guys in future videos.